Welcome. Thank you so much for coming out to all these special sessions this week that we've been doing with IT Revolution authors. Today we have the author of Project to Product, Mik Kersten, Dr. Mik Kersten, and he's here to share with us some of the work he's been doing with Parts Unlimited. So this session is going to be a bit more interactive. So any questions you've got, any commentary, just post it right in Slack. You can also post it in the Zoom chat, and he will be addressing some of these live as he's going. Mik, pass it over to you.
All right, welcome everyone. And as Alex said, yeah, I think the more interactive we can make this, the better. I'll share some thoughts with you on what Parts Unlimited is doing dramatically wrong and how some of the work of Project to Product could have prevented some of those things or assisted people like Maxine on the journey. So, but yeah, please feel free to throw your questions in, ask questions as we go. And what I'm going to try to get to is just start a bit higher level, but really dig into the 5 ideals. Because to me, those are the narrative of the book is amazing. It's compelling. I think it'll have a really big impact on all those leaders in our organizations that read it. And the really big thing for me is some of the takeaways that come out of this, to have them think differently, so that they maybe don't need an army of consultants like myself well, I'm not actually less of a consultant, but to get through these things. So I think I want to start in on, well, I'll actually start it. Let me just share my screen as well and show some slides in a second. But I really do want to start in on what I thought was just an amazing aspect of the book before we dig into what and how Parts Unlimited could have really seen things differently. And one of my favorite moments of the narrative, and I think one of the most impactful ones, and one that I really hope a lot of leaders pay very close attention to, is really what happened with Maxine as she got down to the bowels and the weeds of the organization. And this is something, before, again, as a consultant, I started looking at how they could have done differently. This activity is, I think, more valuable than any consulting activity that you could do. Maxine actually went and sought, well, she was kind of forced into finding the ground truth of how value is delivered at Parts Unlimited. And one of the things that I think is, for those of us who've had the frustrations with how to get organizations innovating more, how to get our organizations being more productive, I think this disconnect between what happens day to day as people are trying to deliver value through their daily work, through their teams, and what the leadership of the organization is seeing and thinking. And that it's really that massive disconnect that causes so many problems. And I think with the best of consultants' intentions, or the best of leadership intentions, often means that great transformation efforts, great DevOps rollouts, great agile transformations, they just do not deliver the results. So I think in my own view as a consultant, there's nothing more important than understanding and tracing the journey of Maxine through these different silos, these problems that she uncovers as she tries to deliver value for Parts Unlimited. And I think for those of you who've already read the book, I think this will be familiar to you. For those that haven't, this is one of, I think, the key stories in it is, as Maxine tries to set up her environment, files a ticket, she traces that ticket through the different silos of Parts Unlimited. And really all she's trying to do is write some code, is understand how to build the system, how to deploy it. And basically that walkthrough, the very vivid vision that you start seeing of how difficult it is for someone to get onboarded, for someone to deliver innovation through software at Parts Unlimited is illustrated so well through that story. So to me, as a pretend consultant for Parts Unlimited today, the question is, how could we have prevented that, right? How could we have prevented that frustration? Because, by the way, most people, unlike Maxine, would have given up at some point and either just checked out, realized there was going to be no flow or joy in this organization, or they would have quit if there were more options available to them. So I think we need to ask ourselves at Parts Unlimited, how could we have prevented what Maxine learned? How could we, at a leadership level, understood how profound that problem was that she was experiencing as she was trying to ramp up, as she was trying to deliver value through all of these organizational silos. And there's that quote from her that I just love, that I think are the kinds of things that we need to listen to as leaders, as consultants, as contributors. She says, we don't have a value stream. What we've got is more like a stagnant value pond full of scum breeding malaria. So what is it that caused that pond? How has it been around for so long? And how could we have seen that pond sooner? How could we have detected this situation? Is really the question I want to answer. And so what I should mention a little bit, let me share some slides right now, a little bit about the journey between project to product and the Unicorn project, because I think Jean and I have had some interesting shared experiences of this front as we've tried to help organizations become software innovators and move faster. So, for me, the journey with the Unicorn project started when Jean and I guess I was hearing about it before, but I really realized how profound a thing was going on when almost exactly a year ago to the day, actually, Jean and I visited CompuWare in Chris O'Malley. And Jean, right before we went on what was this big, basically a Gemba walk, has understood how CompuWare delivers value, how they work, and so on. We had a drink at a bar, and Jean had what you see here on the left is this piece of paper with a whole bunch of scribbles on it, not enough scribbles, and he was trying to basically take all the lessons that he's learned from our community, from the enterprise DevOps community, and put them together into this amazing narrative. But he was quite concerned at that particular moment that all he had was a bunch of words. And it's like, Jean, this is, you're writing amazing books. This is going to be, this is more than a bunch of words. But he really wanted something to tie all this together. And we started talking, and he started talking about these things these main themes of the book. Over the course of the next day, it was just the most amazing thing to watch, because out of that came more scribbles onto this piece of paper. It got more and more wrinkled. And this 5 ideals started emerging. They basically, I think all of them, he was refining them over the next few weeks, but all of them seemed to form that day out of the struggles that were already there in Maxine's journey. And out of the, really the lessons that she needed to extract and that we as a community need to extract from that journey. So the key thing for me, and the key thing I want to dig into as we try to figure out how to help Parts Unlimited avoid these kinds of problems, is how these 5 ideals really map to things that we can act on today, and how at both a business and a technology level we can understand them. And one of the biggest issues I see with consulting efforts, with other efforts of uncovering these things, is this complete lack of understanding between, and really different language, different communication, between the problems, so the anti-ideals, that are perceived at the level of the people doing the work. And I've personally spent a couple decades just writing code, so I kind of get what that's like, and what leadership sees as the core problems. And I think one of the biggest gifts the Unicorn Project has for the community is to, in a I think a very effective and at some points very even emotional way, give leaders a sense for what it's like to try to contribute, try to help your company win when you've got all of these things in your way. So fundamentally, I think the 5 ideals are what helps us break through that. And the way I've seen the project, the product, and flow framework contribution is as a way of detecting when you're basically shifting away from the ideals. And another way of looking at it is any agile transformation that we've got will either help bring the organization towards the ideals, or any DevOps transformation, of course, or digital transformation, or bring us away from those ideals. So how can we figure that out? How can we measure that? And how can we make the case to our organizations, our leadership, of why we need to move towards these ideals? So I'll dig into those in a moment. So before I dig into some of the consulting exercises here, any questions so far? And so William's saying, just knowing how long things take to flow through the system is a great start. Where I work, we started to do this even manually. So I think, yeah, we will jump into that very quick. So, and this point of value stream mapping, I'll get to in just a moment as well. So let me start with that. Here we go. Oh, and my screen sharing would have just stopped, right? Let me fix that, 1 second. There we go. All right. So as I've been pondering how to help organizations like Parts Unlimited deal with this problem, there's this really big thing that struck me in terms of how we think about improvement, how we think about moving towards ideals, how we detect if an organization is moving away from its ideals. And the biggest problem that I've seen is that there isn't a consistent way of understanding that or measuring it. So there's these great ideas, there are these great frameworks, there's a way of tracking productivity in delivery. We've got things like change success rate, we've got the agile metrics like story point velocities and so on, and throughput metrics and such. But there really isn't a consistent way of understanding whether are we delivering more value? Are we really helping our customers moving closer to our customers, delivering them more value or not? So the way I believe that we should now do this at Parts Unlimited is through something that Flow Framework introduces. So I'll give you a really quick crash course for those who haven't learned it, but without painting the whole story, the Flow Framework says what we fundamentally need to care about is our value streams. That's how we deliver to customers. So each product value stream is how you actually deliver business value, how you de-risk your software, how you make sure that you manage things like technical debt. And as we saw with Maxine, that's not what was happening at Parts Unlimited. There wasn't this structure, there wasn't an organizational structure that was built around delivering value. There were a lot of projects, there's a lot of references to project management in there. There's a lot of staying in their lanes. There's a lot of PRDs and project management metrics as a way of measuring how IT is delivering for the business. The Flow Framework really tries to turn that completely on its head. It says, we have all these internal activities. Of course, we'll have internal organizational structures, but the primary way that we need to really structure our software delivery, our innovation in our organizations has to be around the customers and has to be around what customers pull. This is skipping ahead slightly to the fifth ideal of customer focus, but in the end, everything has to start with a customer. Everything has to be in, Jeff Bezos' terms, working backwards from that delivery. So the question that I think the first question that at a business level, Parts Unlimited needs to get completely on the same page on is what are we delivering to our customers? So what is value? Because if the business side is not agreeing with the technologists, we end up in exactly these states. We create the wrong shapes of silos. We create too many silos. And the silos, of course, are created around internal activities and political structures and budgets rather than around what we now call value streams, which is how value flows to our customers. But before we can really understand how to structure those things, we need to understand how to measure them, and we need to understand how that value can flow. So the main thing, I won't belabor it right now, but the main thing that project to project introduces with the Flow Framework is that the 4 flow items, features, defects, risks, and debts, are the units that you measure in terms of the flow of value in software delivery. Features are things that in Parts Unlimited contribute to the end customer's experience, like those cool things that we saw being delivered at the end of the Unicorn project with data analysis and learning from different, how different parts combine and learning from all that data that was built up. Defects, because as we know, and as we've seen Maxine and the Unicorn project as well, as defects build up, value streams get overtaken by them and very little can be delivered. Risks, because any data breach needs to be prioritized, as Parts Unlimited has experienced. I think repeatedly at this point, if you're not prioritizing security, compliance, availability, and so on, you end up with many of the projects that we saw, the problems that we saw, and then debts. Because as Maxine witnessed, technical debt, when it builds up too high, you can get into insurmountable problems. You can get into platform dead ends, you get into situations where the entire software stack is unsalvageable. So I'll now take you through a few scenarios I'll show you a little bit more on the Flow Framework, and then take you through scenarios how we could have diagnosed some of Parts Unlimited's problems through the lens of the Flow Framework to make Maxine's journey much more easy, and I guess to have made the Unicorn project a much more boring book in the end. But to summarize quickly, the whole goal of the flow framework is to give a common measurement structure between the technology side and the business side. And again, the way we do that is by defining these product value streams. So everything that's delivering value to a customer is structured as a product value stream. And what we really care about is the flow of value. How many features did we deliver through that product value stream? We care about teams because each product value stream is composed of multiple teams. It's not a single team, right? We acknowledge the fact that a single feature team can't deliver an end-to-end product. It'll tend to require between 2 and 10 teams to do that kind of thing. And of course, we will, at the bottom layers of the flow framework is actually where we tap into that ground truth of how people actually work. So how long that ticket that Maxine filed took to actually get resolved across all the silos it went through as she traced it manually. And really at the top right of the flow framework, how that delivers on business value. Because of course, if Maxine had been provisioned in a day, not weeks, not a couple of weeks, she might have delivered that first feature sooner. And for that, we've got in the flow framework, the flow metrics. So flow velocity, flow efficiency, flow time, and flow load. And so now just assume that for Parts Unlimited, we've actually defined these product value streams, one of which Maxine's working on, and we're able to start measuring and capturing these flow metrics. So I'll explain each of the flow metrics in terms of how they could have helped Parts Unlimited. So, but before I jump into that, any high-level questions on the sort of the flow metrics and the flow framework in particular? So Steve is saying it's hard to instrument meetings, handoffs, scheduling, and all the biggest problems. Exactly. So hold that thought, Steve. I'll show you how we can at least detect when that's happening. And even when we've got parts that are uninstrumented, how we can actually see through some of those things. So, and that gets back to William's point as well. Is when you've got these manual processes, because of course, again, in the Unicorn project, you see how much of Maxine's work was manual, how much of the handoffs between different silos were manual, how can we actually get to the point whether we understand we're improving or we aren't. So keep asking them, and I'm gonna get into discussing basically the first ideal of locality and simplicity. So and I'm going to illustrate this through a story. So that I've heard an organization different than Parts Unlimited who was experiencing a problem that they just could not wrap their heads around. So again, we know we've got these product value streams. We know, and they're there, right? Whether you're managing them or they're managing you, they actually exist in your organization if you're delivering software to a customer. So, and somehow at the end of the day, something's shipping and it just might not be shipping very quickly. So in terms of the first ideal of locality and simplicity, and I think, to me, this ideal, the power of this ideal is just incredible. The more organizations I speak with, the more I see this coming up. So I'll start kind of at the simpler, but I'll explain why I think this one is potentially more profound than any of the other 5 ideals. We kept seeing at other organizations, and I believe you at Parts Unlimited might be seeing this as well, you keep adding developers to a critical project, right? This thing has to ship in 9 months. We have to hit that first release date. We have to hit that marketing launch date. And as developers are being added, delivery is slowing. So first of all, do you know if delivery is slowing? Because how do you measure delivery? The whole point of, by the way, of flow velocity is to measure delivery in a way that encompasses all the flow items. If you, for example, ignore how much technical debt your developers are working on, ignore how many security incidents or unplanned work have come into a value stream, and you don't measure that, you don't even have a full picture of flow velocity, which is why flow velocity has to be encompassing of each of the flow items. And it means every single work item, no matter what scaling framework you're using, you could be using the Scaled Agile framework, you could be using ITIL processes for your support and IT operations and so on. Every single unit of work, every single work item, every single problem incident change, every single project task, each of those maps in to one of the flow items. And each of those are represented, and then through those we can actually get an accurate view of flow velocity. And so the question for this organization, like for Parts Unlimited became, is as we add more developers to try to hit this date, why are we seeing this? You know, some of you may know as the mythical man month effect from Fred Brooks' book, but why are we seeing delivery actually slowing? And Maxine was actually seeing exactly the same thing I've seen at organization after organization. So I've been busy over the course of the last, better part of the last 2 years deploying the flow framework at different organizations. And my colleagues at TaskStop have been supporting all of those activities. And we're seeing this over and over, is that there's this misalignment of the software architecture with the organizational structure, and then with the structure of those product value streams. So William, you were mentioning in the chat, value stream mapping, right? If you do a value stream mapping, you'll actually have a sense for how things flow through your systems, right? How things go from user story or customer need or requirement through development. You might still have some testing or updates to your test harnesses to get that done, and eventually deliver value to a customer. So why is it that these things are slowing? And again, the number one cause that we've been seeing is that the software architecture, the number one bottleneck to flow velocity that's not resolved by any developers, is that the software architecture that's been defined as this big enterprise architecture that's meant to support every single thing from now until for the next 40 years, as this super elegant architecture, has been created as a set of technology layers. It's been potentially optimized to organizational silos and, in that Conway's Law way. It's been had very separate ways of dealing with the development side and the operation side. Potentially the design side's got its own silos. And so we end up with this architecture that's not aligned to how we deliver value to customers. It's actually aligned to internal activities of the organization, or it's aligned to technology layers, like data layer, pipeline layer, model view and controller layers if you're living in that past still. So we can actually diagnose this for Parts Unlimited by tracking flow velocity. Because if we start tracking flow velocity, we start seeing, well, where did this thing get stuck? Chances are it got stuck in something that Dominica de Grandis uses in her book, Making Work Visible, also an IT Revolution Press, as these unknown dependencies. You'll have a dependency between one value stream and another value stream, which is illustrated here. And if you actually start tracking flow velocity, as we've done with our customers, you'll see that you've got this business application. Let's say you've got this mobile application, and these user stories, these features that you're trying to complete, they keep getting stuck and waiting on API from someone else, or something else getting added to the data models that they can't quite consume. And adding developers into that, well, it gives you the overhead of onboarding those developers, but it doesn't actually help you go any faster, because that's not where your constraint is. So per the theory of constraints, you're putting effort somewhere other than the constraint, you're adding more developers, but it's actually those wait states, waiting on some other value stream, waiting on, and it might not be API work, right? It might actually be something missing in a manual security review process that's also misaligned to your software architecture and should actually be baked into your delivery pipeline and your software architecture. So the locality and simplicity actually provides us, this ideal provides us with a guide for this. So what it basically says is we need that alignment, not just, we can no longer look into just the software architecture and its own modularity for locality and simplicity. We can't any longer just optimize our org charts based on purely HR specific things. We actually need to look at these things holistically, these two different parts, from locality and simplicity between our software architecture, our organizational team structure, and then the product value streams that we deliver to customers too. And we need to optimize for that so that we have the loosest possible coupling between different product value streams. Ideally, in the Unicorn project, you hear the stories around the square problem and so on. Ideally, you don't need to take out anybody to lunch to implement a cool new feature. And seeing where flow velocity gets stuck, seeing where things depend on other things is a great indicator of when you're not moving towards that goal. So by measuring flow velocity for your value streams, you'll actually see, are you improving and heading towards this ideal? or are you actually moving away from it? And moving away from it is an extremely frustrating thing for developers, which is, again, why I think this one is so profound. Dan Studevant and Carlos Baldwin of the Harvard Business School, I refer to some of their work in Project to Product. They actually studied the fact that developers on a tangled architecture, so one where you can't innovate, you can't add features easily without taking a bunch of people to lunch or making changes all over the code base, are more likely to quit than when you have a modular architecture where you can actually make those changes with locality and simplicity. But the key thing that was a really, that really changed my perspective on things is that, you know, I studied software architecture and research software architecture for quite a long time. And I always thought of it as in terms of making as modular and as elegant a structure as possible. But I've now shifted my perspective completely. And this is one of the things that Project to Product says is, if you don't think about modularity in terms of those value streams, you could be optimizing that locality for the wrong thing, right? You could be optimizing around making this beautiful API layer for everyone and everything, rather than helping this one value stream move faster. And so I now realize, and as an example, what we do at TaskTop, we only ever implement APIs or, you know, basically a modular architecture if over the next 6 to 12 months, we think the feature flow for this value stream will be faster. Otherwise, we could be overgeneralizing and investing in something that might not be useful because, you know, Amazon or someone else will make that as a part of their core platform technology. So this, again, this one is so profound because it has you thinking about not just locality and simplicity in the software architecture, but in the code and in the entire organization. So I will pause there before we get to the next ideal. Any questions? So measure your progress to this ideal with flow velocity. All right, so I will jump to the next one. And this is the focus, flow, and joy. This one is near and dear to me. I spent a ton of time working on focus and flow for developers in the early stages of my career through open source projects, such as Eclipse Mylan. This was a key part of my PhD thesis. It was really neat to see, you know, Gene really, you know, bring this into Maxine's experience. And this is again, measuring whether you're heading towards this or away from it is what is so critical to, I think, Parts Unlimited success. So one of the ways that we've noticed other organizations can measure this is once you've got those product value streams defined, you can realize whether you're heading towards it or against. So key part of the flow framework, as you'll notice here, there's this slightly odd thing in the top right where you're tracking the business results for your product value streams that says happiness. And it turns out what we started doing, what we've got our other clients doing, is for each product value stream, measuring the happiness of the staff on that product value stream. So this is quite different to what I was doing at TaskTop 5 years ago, which is we really cared about our staff's happiness. That hasn't changed. We care about their focus and them getting into that state of flow. But the way that we were measuring this was with the org chart, right? So we were looking at how happy are developers, how happy are designers, how happy are our business development people, how happy are our support people, which was interesting, but it gave us one kind of signal, but it was missing something completely different that I think Maxine very much uncovers in the Unicorn project. So what we started doing is we started measuring employee net promoter score for the product value streams, which is why this is now such a key part of the flow framework. Each product value stream, you measure how happy all the staff working on that thing are. You might have contractors in it. Ideally, you'd measure how happy they are. You have designers, all of those different roles. You measure it for that product value stream. And then you learn some amazing things. Because you start realizing, for example, is that the place where you've got the least locality, let's say, and these are actually real results that we've seen with ourselves, with customers. If you've got one product value stream that's got a more tangled architecture, chances are developers will be less happy. Your happiness score, your engagement score, and our rates, the employee net promoter score, will actually be lower. You allow them to invest in tech debt reduction. So you change the flow distribution of that product value stream to invest more in tech debt. And I've seen this over and over. You can actually see the happiness of that product value stream rise because these teams now have more focus and flow and joy. They're able to deliver more value through that rather than always being stuck in these wait states waiting on someone else or trying to implement a feature that should be easy but having to take them 3 weeks or taking forever to fix a defect because they have to touch 1,800 places in the code. So measuring focus and flow and joy actually gives us a way of understanding the health of these product value streams. And it actually, there's ways that we can measure how we get away from that health. So I want to dig into this top level metric of flow load. So one thing we've noticed, and this happens because of unplanned work, a lot of the things that we learned in the Phoenix project, but what we've noticed is that if flow load gets too high, and flow load, by the way, it's from Donald Reinertsen, it's a measure of work in progress. So if flow load gets too high, velocity gets lower, and the teams get way unhappy because they're constantly thrashing between different features they're working on, feature and incident, and so on. So this is exactly where Parts Unlimited found themselves, right? If you recall your journey. The flow load was super high on the teams, but even less was getting done. It's like in the goal when if you overload the robots, even in the case of robots, right? You put too much work in progress, less work comes out, and the business tends to think the opposite. So by basically measuring things like flow load, measuring happiness, you can actually see, again, if you're moving towards or away from this ideal, and you'll actually realize that the business gets more out when you've got happier, more engaged developers who have a manageable flow load rather than everyone going into this death march and getting a whole lot less done in the process. So someone had a question?
Yes. Most recent one, what do you feel are some of the most underappreciated insights?
In the Unicorn project. So
Yes.
Some of the most underappreciated insights in the Unicorn project. I mean, I think there's some fascinating ones. So I think the really neat thing is that they all tie together with this thread of sort of, some organizational or dysfunctions, right? So I think, the insights around the stay in your lane, right? How Maxine slowly chips away out of staying in her lane over the course of the book is just amazing, right? What I've noticed in organizations that actually get through these things is they've got people like Maxine who do not stay in their lane and who actually show a better way. And what we've been trying to do is give them a data-driven way of showing that to their leadership, right? Maxine actually had to demonstrate it with results, but she did that by not staying in her lane. I think there's this underappreciated theme that's super interesting to me, which is this relationship between what Maxine is doing and looking for. So I don't know for those of you who've read it, Maxine actually comes from an ERP background. And the way that she takes that ERP mindset and applies it at Parts Unlimited, I think is really, really interesting. So to me, that's very subtle in the book, might not be that appreciated, but personally, I've actually not, Gene and I had a number of discussions on this way back, but I actually think that's where we need to be headed. It's that mindset, that kind of systems thinking, that we can break through these silos in a rigorous way, a way that the business endorses and buys into. I think that's a subtle and underappreciated thing. I think there's also this subtle but important thread of the way Maxine approaches transformation, right? You'll notice talk of horizons there. There's in Project to Product, I talk about horizons. I also talk about the different investment horizons, H1, H2, H3. Jeffrey Moore's more recent work around zone to win and the zone model for transformation. We actually create an incubation zone. You create a transformation zone that add on to your productivity zone. I won't go into detail on those right now, but again, that thread is a way of systematizing that basically horrendous, but fundamentally in the end successful journey that Maxine had to make it much, much easier the next time around. And again, very, very subtle at the end of the book, or in the last third of the book, I think a super important concept. So I think those are some of, to me, that the themes that were quite embedded in there, but really important to people reading it, trying to apply these concepts. So
You got another if you want it. And
sure, I'll
feel
take
free
another.
to,
And then go ahead.
Yeah, feel free to put any of these to the end as well. Okay. Is it true that in the shift from project to product, the value stream network itself needs to be treated as a product with its own stable, open-ended delivery team and not as a project with a defined end?
100% true. And I wish everyone understood that. Yes, so I will just quickly shift, and this is kind of very much aligned with the ideals, but the way, I was just talking about locality and simplicity, right? And I think what happens, and I guess this is a fairly subtle point, but that's across Unicorn Project, right? Is that Maxine, when she starts wanting to work with the code, she thinks of the pipeline as a product. If you come from an ERP background, of course, you think of an ERP implementation as a product, right? It's something that needs to function, needs to be supported, needs investment, and so on. So this slide I'm showing right here is, we can't think of products just as the business products, right? Parts Unlimited kept only seeing the business products, which guess what? Means a dramatic amount of underinvestment in the platform products, like the data pipelines, right? And in the end, Maxine discovers and demonstrates, well, she doesn't discover it. She learns quite a bit about how important and how powerful new ways of handling customer data are, and how that can actually drive the business's top line going forward. How it can actually go from firefighting to innovation in the age of software. So that's what in project to product are the platform products, right? They're not directly visible to a customer, but they're actually what fuels every innovative customer experience. So Maxine demonstrates and discovers the value of those. And then the lowest layer is the actual delivery tools themselves, right? Which is treating your platform, treating your continuous delivery platform, your tool chain, what we call the value stream network itself, as a product. And a pattern that we've noticed that Parts Unlimited would be smart to apply, or at least heavily consider, is that the more innovative a tech company is, the more investment they tend to have at the lower levels. So the story I always tell is, you've got Microsoft with developer division. At that tool value stream network level, they have 3,500 staff working, right? Whereas most organizations have what? Even large organizations with tens of thousands of IT staff will have 50, 10, 15. They have, you look at the platform products coming from these companies, they're built on those platforms. And then the business products leverage all of that, right? This is the other story I tell around this, is that BMWs, this is a big theme in project to product, their most important product is not the i8, it's not the 3 Series, it's the plant. So you need to heavily invest in your plant. And Maxine is making that case through her journey. Through that, she discovers how important a platform investment is into the data platform. And that's what will make the products most innovative. And of course, the traditional business way of looking at it is completely backwards. Let's invest everything in our customer-facing business products, and then the things below get starved. So I think the question is how do we use the ideals to make that case for our business? And I think I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here, but interestingly, I think to me, it's that ideal of customer focus, because the ideal of customer focus is how you tie together the work done by technologists with something the business understands. That's the common thread that the whole organization should understand, is customer focus. So quick story, Flowmetrics diagnostic story. Why did it take, and this is real data, none of our customers, why did it take, actually it's Nationwide Insurance, they told the story at DevOps Enterprise Summit a year and a half ago. Why did it take 120 days to deliver value to customers, right? We were diagnosing the flow time. And flow time is the time from when remember, value stream mapping came up today, and value stream mapping is all well and good, but the challenge I have with value stream mapping is it tends to be a one-time exercise, right? It's on a whiteboard, it's in a visual diagram, it's on a slide, and 3 weeks later it's stale because this team is working differently, there's been a small reorg, we've hired more people over here, and so on. So all of this, to track flow time, you have to have a live value stream map. You have to have your value stream modeled and defined. Once you've got that, you can actually map the live flow time from when work enters the value stream to when value has been delivered and it stops. So that's what we did, right? And again, not this focus on cycle time, which is how long it took from code commit to code deploy, how long it took to close a user story, how fast are we in requirements analysis or in business analysis, right? Those are all these cycle times, but Parts Unlimited needs to understand its end-to-end flow time from when the business need came in around this new campaign, whatever it was, to when the software was running and stable and secure and reliable. So we did this analysis and we noticed that it took one of our customers 120 days to deliver this, but only 2.5% of the time, and these are thousands of IT staff, was spent in development. So if that's happening, you need to understand, again, where the bottlenecks are that are slowing these things down. Because if you're gonna, as a business, by the way, this is because, of course, technologists get this because they're frustrated with this every day, but we're trying to convince the business people here with data, with these flow metrics, is if you want to speed up, it's not that we're going 10 times too slow. It's not that we're 100 times slower than that, that fintech or other tech startup that you're all worried about. It's that we've got these bottlenecks and we've got to invest in the bottleneck. And once you start doing that, it's been actually fascinating because once you start tracking flow time and where the wait states are, even though, by the way, the wait state could be a manual process, as the question came up earlier, you start making the business case. This is, by the way, how we track it, right? All the active states versus wait states. You'll actually see there's a long wait state here waiting for API. As Maxine, there's a long wait state. There's a long wait states here waiting to get customer data in the right format for me to do some analysis, right, in my code. As you start seeing those wait states, you start seeing, well, those wait states are because we've underinvested in our data pipeline, because we're still using, some legacy data technologies that, have some batch processing that takes us 72 hours to get something. And you start getting a customer-centric business case. Let's invest in, event-based data. Let's invest in Kafka. Let's invest, however we do it, the technology doesn't matter. Let's actually invest in those layers down. And again, what I'm seeing so powerful and what I know will work at Parts Unlimited now that you've had the Maxine's experience is, take that customer focus. The most important thing for your customers is how quickly you're delivering value to them. That time to market metric, that's flow time. We can measure it across your value stream network. So now the question is, how do we reduce your flow time? How do we cut the flow time in half? The way we do that, and how do you deliver more to your customers? The way we do that is investing in those product value streams that are not customer facing, but that enable all the customer facing value delivery. So long answer, but again, very clear way of measuring how we get to that fifth ideal of customer focus. And I'll pause there. These are great questions. Any more?
There was one from earlier, but none from this part right now.
So let's keep going. Which ideal are we on? Improvement of daily work. Okay. So again, this is, the thing I love about this ideal, the improvement of daily work, is it works at every part, every layer of the organization. So I think a lot of us have practiced our own ways of improving our own productivity, our own ways of improving daily work. What we've been trying to do for Parts Unlimited and for others is to systematically figure out how to, again, know whether you're heading in a positive direction of improvement of daily work or in a negative direction. I just gave you an example of a negative direction of improvement of daily work, which is you're hiring a bunch of developers when developers not your bottleneck. And of course, the knee-jerk reaction for everyone is to hire more developers rather than to invest more in automation and connecting development and operations, or in automating some processes or whatever the bottleneck might be. So the key question is, how do you measure whether you're actually improving daily work? And I think the great thing with these ideals is that they resonate with people at an individual level. They resonate at a team level. And to me, what's most important is they're meaningful at the entire org level, the entire business and software delivery organization level. So we've come up, the flow framework, we've come up with this measure of whether daily work is improving or reducing, and it's called flow efficiency. I'll show that chart again quickly here. But again, flow efficiency just measures wait states versus active work. Because every time you have a wait state, your work is, interestingly, it's stalled, right? So when your work is stalled, chances are developers, the things that stall the work will actually frustrate a developer, right? You might be stalled because you're waiting on some wireframes. You might be stalled because, like Maxine, you're waiting on a development environment that you can contribute code to. And it's taking weeks, not the day that it should take at max. You might be stalled because something's in a security review. You might be stalled because this question came up in the chat early at the meeting. You might be stalled because you need input from leadership on this feature. And this meeting where you were going to get that input has now been rescheduled 3 times and 6 weeks have passed. So the really neat thing is that by tapping into the value stream network, and I kind of almost view this as tapping into the experience that Maxine had within one value stream, but we need to tap into that across the whole organization. And the really neat thing is, because as you saw, Maxine is creating these tickets, opening these tickets, there's a user story, there's some code commits, there's different workflow states that things go through. We can actually measure flow efficiency, both in the aggregate across all work being done, right down to the individual, say, Jira user story, Jira issue. And what you'll see is developers, as long as you've implemented one of the agile tools like Jira, Azure DevOps, or the many others, GitHub, GitLab, anything else, once you've implemented them, they'll actually have workflow states that developers and others transition things into, because whenever you're blocked on something, you actually want to indicate that you're blocked on it, right? If you're blocked on a code review, you indicate that you're blocked on a code review. And so by looking at flow efficiency, we can actually see, is the flow efficiency improving as we try to, again, you need to give your organization the ability to improve daily work, right? If you don't care about improving daily work, we have no shot at this ideal. All that I want to be able to do for you with project to product and the flow framework is to let you know, is it getting better or is it getting worse? Once you've actually realized that you need to invest in improvement of daily work in order to survive and thrive in the age of software. So this has been just incredible to watch as we actually see real customer data through our own, well, we see it through our products like Task.Viz, what's happening with flow efficiency, because it actually allows you to see, everyone's got a hypothesis, right? We have, too few designers. So will hiring designers improve our daily work? We want to use, well, let's take the Maxine's new favorite language, so Clojure. Will Clojure actually improve our daily work and have us deliver code faster? So that's a hypothesis. And if you actually see the flow efficiency go up, it did. If you see it go down, it didn't. If you forgot to train a bunch of people on Clojure because only Maxine knew it, and now Parts Unlimited is scaling its Clojure stack to many other parts of the business, well, you might have a flow efficiency go down because people have not been trained on that new programming language sufficiently, and you need to give them a course for a couple of weeks and do some code camps and so on. So the really neat thing is that the flow efficiency data is already there in the systems today, because these tickets, issues, incidents, and so on, they have these workflow states, and you just measure, is flow efficiency increasing or decreasing, and then it actually, again, makes the case for investing into your bottleneck, whether the bottleneck is a manual process, whether the bottleneck is more training for your staff, whether the bottleneck is a further improvement in investment in daily work, because you just noticed that for the last 2 quarters, you made an organization-wide investment in improvement of daily work, and you're actually seeing the results. The business is seeing the results through faster flow over the following couple months. So I think, again, the key thing is this is measurable. Making it measurable helps you make the case for the business and for your teams and for your people to invest more in it. And the metric that gets you this is flow efficiency. So, and I will briefly pause there.
There's a question I could pull up here if you'd like.
Sure.
There's, What are some of the best ways to visualize a product, preferably a DevOps pipeline? One product can be the software at Parts Unlimited, and one can be an airplane with a lot of software.
Right. So visualizing, so this is, I think, one of the biggest and most interesting problems that we have today. I will tell you, and I can do this I've skipped one ideal, which is psychological safety. So I'll try to kind of give you a summary of how I see that playing out in terms of where we're heading with visualizations as an industry, efforts that we've been going through at my company, and so on. So first of all, I think the telemetry for CI/CD pipelines, I think, is a relatively well-solved problem. I know at my company, it works well. You've like whatever combination of tools that you're using, open source and commercial, the CI/CD pipeline tools and the tooling layer on top of that can get you some very good telemetry in terms of deployment, automated testing, and so on. So I think the bigger challenge is not visualizing the pipelines themselves, but I think it's in visualizing value streams. So, if we imagine, and this is just a kind of road metaphor, if we imagine what it's like to get value, we're now at Parts Unlimited, so it's a suitable metaphor. We've got cars on this highway. We want to increase the throughput of great cars that make it through this highway, but to do that, we actually need to visualize the value stream. So we need the equivalent, again, getting back to those previous questions, of a live value stream map, right? I've got the book, one of my favorite books here. Carmen Diardo gave me this particular one, but you've got the value stream maps in books like Learning to See. This is not good enough for software, right? This is great book though. We need a live value stream map because of how complex software is and how sophisticated the flows are of value are across teams. So to me, I think we need to be able to, again, visualize and measure the flow of value. So the flow distribution, how many features did we deliver, or what's happening with technical debt, right? We know it's very hard to measure the technical debt of a code base in any principled way. No one's really doing that properly. There are lots of attempts. We try. We've got every extension to Sonar possible to do this, Sonar Cube. But we can actually visualize the flow of tech debt work. We can see how much is being done. We can see, is it going up or is it going down? We really care about, of course, flow efficiency, because what is the bottleneck? Where is the blockade? So to me, the most interesting and important problem right now is actually defining and visualizing those value streams. And the way we do that, we know where the data is, right? The data is in the tools themselves. The data is where Maxine worked, and the tool that, the disconnects of the tools and manufacturing processes that may have frustrated her. So I'll give an example of how we're doing this and how we can help Parts Unlimited with this. Is we've basically created a solution that will allow you to, for example, see what's the trend of technical debt. It's a little hard to see here, but this purple, as you see, there's a bunch of technical debt investment. And then once that debt was reduced, well, look what happened. Feature velocity went up. And the chances are the teams have been screaming at at leadership for this for ages, for the last 3 years, is we need to invest more in tech debt. Everyone says, yes, we need to invest more in tech debt, but nothing happens, right? Because once comes time to planning, release planning, PI planning, and so on, of course, it's just the features that dominate, without this understanding that, well, if we invest more in debt reduction, we will get more features in the long run. As again, the Unicorn Project is basically a story that embodies this, right? I believe that once you properly visualize and measure, and believe is too weak a word because I've now seen this over and over, you can double the flow velocity on almost any enterprise product value stream, right? That waste, and this is kind of the depressing part of Unicorn Project, that book, I would like to say it's an exaggeration of what's out there. It rings very true in terms of what I'm seeing in terms of waste that's happening on product value streams, right? There's just still way too much out there, and we, simply the opportunity for improvement. Now, the flip side of this is the opportunity for improvement is tremendous, right? You actually start investing in those bottlenecks. You can make your people, your staff, so much happier so quickly when they double their flow velocity, because now they feel like their work is actually being delivered and they get into into that flow state, that focus, flow, and joy that all developers want, because they all remember it when they worked on some simple product early on in their careers, right? So again, I think the key thing is you define these product value streams across your toolchain, across the value stream network. You start measuring these flow metrics, and then you can take Maxine's lessons, hard-earned lessons that I think so many people are reading and learning from now, and you can actually scale them to your organization by measuring these flow metrics. So I will pause on that one. I think we made it through all 5 ideals. Hopefully, it gave the flow metrics gave you a sense for, again, how you can turn these I think extremely well thought out and rigorous and profound ideals into measurement of daily actions that can really make your organization function like a software innovator. So, any more questions?
I've got one here from a little bit. This person really likes your book and is wondering, how do they spread the message outside of software?
Outside of software? Like to hardware and to complex product delivery?
The follow-up is, can you recommend some books for managers, employees at a car company like BMW and physical products, and a hospital with no products?
Yes. Okay. So this is a pretty significant, important question. I think once you get these concepts, and clearly the attendees got that, you realize that these value streams span outside of software, right? That the way that work and the way that work enters into them, if I've had quite a bit of experience with organizations delivering hospital software, right? Or delivering, again, car software is those 2 examples. And the kind of value delivery side starts with that part of the business. So I think, how do you spread the word? I think that my sense is the best shot that we've got right now, and this is what's been so so satisfying for me, is that these books from IT Revolution, a number of them are written in such a way where business leaders, they're accessible to them. You don't need to be steeped in deep in technologies, even though I think it's really cool how Unicorn Project actually goes deep in some technologies quickly. So it gives people a sense, business leaders who are craving that understanding, deeper understanding of technology and of software. It gives them a taste. I think that's super valuable. I think we're getting to the point where it's time to expect our business leaders to read these books. Because if you, just as an example, if a CEO of a company, and every company is becoming a tech company over time, if a CEO of a company that's a traditional business, that's in manufacturing, that's elsewhere, doesn't heed the words of the CEO of BMW, who's saying that more than half of their R&D staff will soon be developers, and with that, doesn't actually understand the concept of technical debt, or the concept of needing to have locality between software and the organizational structure, the software architecture and the organizational structure, they're going to have a hard time making some decisions around the future direction of that company. So I think basically my hope is that, and I'm very happy to see this, is that Project to Product is being read by CEOs of billion-dollar, very large businesses, right? $100 billion businesses. So I was thrilled to see, for example, I'm surprised, I should be honest, to see Project to Product on the reading list of the CEO of Walmart, right? Because Walmart's value streams are pretty complex and have very complex supply chains, right? And I really hope the CEO of Walmart and of every retailer reads Unicorn Project, right? Because I think these books can help shift the understanding of leadership who've grown up around traditional business operations to understand some of the key dynamics of how to deliver value and innovation through software. So I guess long answer to pass around and read the books. I think they're a really good tool for moving the needle. And I guess the only other thing I've learned is that the more senior the people are, the more likely they are to listen to the audiobooks. So also don't forget to send them the audiobooks, as those seem to make a quicker impact in some cases. So.
Great. So, Mik, any last thing you'd like to say to everybody?
No, I think that's it. I think that was a really good note to end on, which is that I'm sure a lot of people listening here already get the message. The concepts of project to product, the Unicorn Project, IT Revolution's other books already very much resonate. And I think the challenge that we all have, where Unicorn Project is a really important step in this direction, is to help others in your organization understand, especially those people who did not grow up around technology, right? When I saw Unicorn Project as #2 nonfiction on the Wall Street Journal list, I was over the moon, right? I was saying, okay, that means it's actually reaching that far, and we have a shot at changing the way business leaders and people across the organization think. And I think that's just so important. So I think if you're listening to this, just keep spreading that word, keep spreading the books, because I think in the end, the ideas and the narratives in those books can really reshape the thinking in your organization, and then help your organization make the right investments, right? Make the right investments in the question that came up before, which is investing in your value stream network, investing in your platform products, and so on. So yeah, I think with that, we can wrap up. All the books are listed on ITRev. I've certainly read everyone and keep sharing them with IT leaders across the globe, and I hope others do the same. So.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Mik, you're such a fun presenter to learn from. You have great energy on video like this. So everybody, thank you for joining us for these special sessions for book club and for being part of this big book club here. We will close out today's session. We'll see you in Slack. See everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Alex.